Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is a show about missing people only, and letters related to missing people. First of all, I've gotten a few comments in the last week, people irritated that I didn't return an email they sent to me. Folks, I try, number one, to work harder than anybody you know. And that includes returning emails when I can. I get hundreds and hundreds of emails, sometimes daily. And it is impossible to get to them all. Now, I truly make a huge effort to read every comment on every video. So if you placed a comment there, chances are I have read that. Now, I've also made a commitment to myself to try to be the most approachable author at this level that I can. And that takes an enormous sacrifice on the part of my family, me, my work, a lot. And part of that effort is to be approachable. People can have a dialogue, and I can answer questions. I do believe that the letter portion of this program is as important as me talking to you about the missing persons cases. And the people that don't understand that and say, hey, get rid of reading the letters, I wish you'd just leave, because you don't get it. And you don't want to understand it, and you're not a deep thinker. Because I believe that some of the letters here have been unbelievably great. Thank you for that. And speaking of letters, let's start with the first one. Hey Dave, I found your channel on YouTube a couple weeks ago and I'm hooked on your videos. I was completely unaware of this phenom. Thank you for all your hard work to find these poor people. I've been fascinated with the nature of time and matter over years, and I've spent no little amount of time pondering them. I do have some ideas about what happened to those who vanished and were never found again. Your evidence of proximity to water and sudden changes in weather, I believe, are key. I believe that those people who suddenly reappear in another time, or they merged into another dimension. Let me stop there for a second. Some people have misconstrued that profile point regarding water. Well, Dave, water's everywhere and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the point. The point is that these people disappear sometimes adjacent to water, sometimes in water. Sometimes they're found in water or adjacent to water. And the facts surrounding those are just too in your face to ignore, just like this person acknowledged. Perhaps time behaves differently over Earth, which is fixed, than it does over water, which flows. Remember I talked to you about these letters some people write here are amazing. Read that to you again. Perhaps time behaves differently over Earth, which is fixed, than it does over water, which flows. You've mentioned swamps, bogs, and sloughs, as I recall. There are places where water doesn't flow, or at least flows slowly or intermittently. Could it be that water slowing to a stop somehow opens up a portal? I recall from one of your videos that you heard many animals stampeded toward you, though you couldn't see them. This was a clue I needed. Is it possible we exist concurrently with other dimensions? Is it possible there is a type of membrane between these dimensions? Maybe you were in a place in which the membrane is particularly thin, or maybe the membrane fluctuates in its integrity. Remember where I was. I was in a road that bisected a swamp. Water. And this man caught that. Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Could sounds, which are merely vibrations, pierce the membrane while the physical progenitors of those sounds remain invisible? Going further, is it possible the weather in the other dimension is different than in our own? If it were, and the membrane broke down for a time, that weather would invade our own dimension, or we would be experiencing two weather phenomena simultaneously. He also mentioned that people appear to run faster than humanly possible when racing toward a tree line, never to be seen again. My first thought on this is that time is experienced very differently in other dimensions. Something I've believed for years because of the megaliths placed around the globe that are aligned to the solstices and equinoxes. I believe they are aligned key between the dimensions necessary because time is progressing differently in each. These are just thoughts, but I will continue to research and ponder this subject. Thanks for your noble efforts. Thank you for the letter. Now, if you don't find that letter fascinating and mind-stimulating, then you're in the wrong place. Because that, to me, is what this is all about. I've told you before. I've had people write to me and say, Dave, about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, you're really a grounded guy, but now you start talking about portals and all these other things that are just too out there. I can't follow you anymore and I'm leaving. Goodbye. That's fine. I get it. If you can't handle this and your mind just can't go there, I get it. I have friends that can't talk to me about seeing something odd in the sky that they can't identify. They don't even want to go. They don't want to touch it. Dave, don't talk to me about it. All right, I get it. That's fine. Different strokes for different folks. And I do understand that. And I don't take any offense. I think everyone's mind is geared to take a little something different. Each mind can absorb things at its own pace. I get it. Not mad. The other thing, if you want to write me an email, please do. If I'm not reading it, somebody else is probably reading it. But send your emails to Can-Am, like Canadian American, Can-Am, C-A-N-A-M, missing, at yahoo.com. And put your thoughts down. Hey, Dave, you're an idiot. I don't want to talk to you again. I don't want to hear you again. Goodbye. Okay, great. But people that write nasty things on these videos are trying to make a public statement. I don't appreciate that. You want to write me an email and tell me what a fool I am because I believe certain ways or whatever, I respect that way more than trying to make a public spectacle about it. And if you're rude about that public spectacle, nobody's going to see it because I've made a promise to the village that this is going to be a safe place where we can all go and exchange ideas. Next letter. Hi, Dave. Hope you're doing as well as possible on this difficult day. Well, let me see. In Montana, it's 50 degrees. It's sunny. It's probably one of the warmest days of the year. It's beautiful outside. I went down to the river the other day. It's still clear. It's a little high, but it's unbelievably awesome. I watched your video today about your son, Ben. It was moving and beautiful and real. I kept thinking how happy and proud both you and Ben look in the pictures hanging in the background. It made my soul a little lighter to see that. But something stuck out in your video to me today, which is why I'm emailing you. In your video, you spoke about how you wouldn't be in front of the camera right now if it wasn't for Ben. 1000% true. I emailed you a few weeks ago about a situation where my girlfriend and I almost became the missing, but didn't because we were aware of your work. I truly believe that if we did not turn around when we did, our bodies and everything on us would not have been found. The title of my previous email was Saved Our Lives. I changed it in this email to Ben Saved Our Lives, for if he was responsible for you being on camera, then he is the reason we received your message, and Ben is the reason we are still alive. I want to say thank you to Ben, and I have out loud in my prayer after watching your video. Thank you, Ben, for saving our lives. We love you. Amen. As I mentioned earlier, your background pictures touched me. It was because I wish I had pictures like that with my dad. My dad could have been a great man, but his choice of alcohol and drug addiction over being the man he should be. He was mean and abusive almost constantly when he was around. I'm 34 years old and he is 60. Even if he had lived so he could be 90, we still would never have made beautiful memories together that it seemed you were able to do with Ben. Hold on to those memories, proudly and with courage, for you did not squander being a dad. I tried. Next letter. Thanks again for all you continue to do, the members of the village. Those of us who have come to understand your quest are eager to continue to hear you share facts and feelings on every topic you deem worthy. Why? Because we've come to trust you. You claim to know little about a lot, while not being an expert on anything. Yet, if I may disagree and state that you are an expert on being comfortable in who you are, what you believe, treating others with respect while never changing to fit in, and being humble enough to know you don't know everything. A couple of things in there I would say are not true. There are many times when I'm not comfortable in my own skin. Many days where I go outside and I don't want to talk to anybody. I hope nobody recognizes me, and I just want to go into a cocoon. And it's just a lot of those days where I may be thinking about the past. I may be not happy with my own performance on something. Maybe I'm not happy how fast things are progressing on a work project. Trust me, I'm as insecure as anybody else. When I'm talking to you, I realize that there's hundreds of thousands of people watching, and YouTube isn't giving me credit. I understand that. I'm not mad. I'm still looking for the right place to go, though. I appreciate those kind words, but I think the record needs to be straight that I'm like everybody else out there. I'm really nobody special. I was talking to somebody just the other day who I didn't know very well, and they started to talk about their family, and in the back of my mind I said, wow, that'd be an interesting book. I always thought that every family out there, if somebody really dug enough, could write a book about a family and make it interesting. Because every family has interesting people, unusual things that have happened to them, struggles that they've had in life. And that's why when you're in a real bad place in life, depressed, friend, you're not alone. Millions of people in this world have been in your position. And there's millions of people that are way worse than you are today. Really. You know, you think about the people in Ukraine that lived in beautiful cities, that had friends and family around them, and had built a nest egg, and it's all gone. And they're transients. And the only possessions they have are what's in that bag in their hand. Think about the depression of going to another country. Most went to Poland, speaking a different language. Brutal. Not knowing where your next meal's coming from, not even where you can get a good glass of water without bacteria. Think about it. When you really are down, think about how the good things, and there's always good things in your life, are happening. Next paragraph. People in the West desperately need leaders who are willing to be themselves no matter what, while also being humble enough to admit they're not always right. Our leaders are so accustomed to flip-flopping their views and standards in an attempt to relate to whomever they're trying to woo. Most individuals with the ability to think critically no longer trust them. Yeah. A while back, Angie and I were in Tennessee, and a congressman named Tim Burchett, had extended himself to me in months prior. And I went to his office, very humble. Now, you got to remember, in my life, being a policeman, you have to look at mannerisms of people, and you have to look at personality and communication skills, and you have to make a judgment about them, sometimes very critically. Sometimes you have an unfair amount of time, but you have to do it, and that judgment will save your life. When that time sitting around Congressman Burchett, and we had a considerable amount of time with him, I was stunned how straightforward, humble, honest, talked about everything, no barriers. He talked about things that most people would never talk about. He talked to me about Bigfoot. He goes, Dave, I'm a believer. I'm a congressman. He goes, I know they were there. And he asked me a bunch of questions. It was a great conversation. Not everybody's horrible. Not everybody is mean. Not everybody is ill will. There are good people in the world. When you couple poor leadership with a drop in religious and spiritual faith, people begin seeking moral guidance from individuals they normally wouldn't. Many have turned to politicians for moral direction, and the results find Americans, Canadians, British, and Australians split upon political lines to a level we've rarely seen outside of issues like slavery. We need more people like you. I may not agree with everything you say, yet I trust your intentions, even if I didn't, because you have offered all villagers mutual respect. Until the average citizen is willing to do the same, we are going to continue to be a society split down the middle. And more dangerously, most will fail to recognize their own part in the problems that exist, continuing to blame those they disagree with for doing and saying many of the same things they themselves do and say. I've had people in my life before that look for somebody to blame. It's a way to push something away and assign blame. And that's the way some people categorize their brain and put in boxes and deal with people that may be difficult to them, or people that may not agree with their outlook on life, their politics, etc. They put them in this box, they put blame around it, they wrap it tight, and they throw it away. Dangerous thing to do. I'm praying for you, and again offer condolences for the loss of your son. As a father, I can't imagine how you feel, yet as a villager who has read countless comments from those you've helped and inspired, I imagine Ben is pleased with the lives you've both been able to save and serve. On the topic of mental health, I thought you might be interested in this website. It's an organization that helps college attendees with mental health issues. And then they got cut off, so I didn't see it. But it's a National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And if you Google National Suicide Prevention Hotline, you'll find it. I've had many really good reports on that. And I'd encourage you to call if you're just feeling down. You need to talk to somebody. Again, friends, we've all been there. Everybody. Even the most positive person you've met is sometimes the most sad person inside. So don't think you're alone. Next letter. Hey Dave, I'd like to stay anonymous. I love your channel. I love that you talk about mental health. I'm sorry for your loss. I have a story to tell you from West Texas. The story is actually my brother's friend. He was out looking for one of his cows he thought had gone through a fence in someone else's property. The person went through this neighbor's property, which is flat land with no mountains, trees, or a river. He came upon a garden. He describes it as very beautiful flowers with very bright colors. A couple drove up and told him he needed to get out of this property. He describes these people as robot-like mannerisms. A couple days later, he described this encounter to the property owner, and he didn't know what this person was talking about, and they never were able to find this garden that he was talking about. My brother's friend is a very respectful person that will never lie about this, so we all believed him. This happened in the late 80s, and many people have tried to look at this garden and find it with no success. Many people have told this person he probably went into another dimension. If you've been around my channel long, you know this has happened to many people I've talked about. It's interesting that something happened on that journey before he reached that garden and those people walking up. But what was that triggering point? That'd be my question. Was it weather, humidity, water? Who knows? Next letter. Hey Dave, I just wanted to reach out to you to send this message of encouragement about all the hard work you're doing in both the news, mental health, and missing 411 cases. I look forward to your videos every day, and I really enjoy listening to you talk and give the facts about what is happening in our world, as well as the missing 411. I've watched both movies several times, read 6 of your books, and I'm currently reading Missing 411 Hunters. A good book. I remember, that was just a brigado statement, sorry. I remember a video you uploaded a few weeks ago about yourself and people seeing an object that would flash different colors. It would be stationary close to the horizon at night. You wanted to know if anyone else spotted this. And I saw what I believe was a color flashing UFO right outside of my house on Tuesday night, February 15th, about 10:30 p.m. It looked like a very bright star, and it was about 30 degrees above the tree line in a northeasterly direction from my back porch. My wife and niece saw it too. We live about 10 minutes from McGee-Tyson Airport outside of Alcoa, Tennessee. Flown into that airport many times. In fact, flew into that airport to see Congressman Burchett. The object appeared to be hovering in the direction of the northeast corner of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I spent hundreds of hours in that park. I tried to look at it through a pair of binoculars, but it was extremely difficult to get into focus. The moon was out directly overhead, and I would look to see if something was wrong with the binoculars, but I could get the moon into focus just fine. I would look at the subject again and again, and it would be way out of focus again. My hands were a bit shaky, so I finally put both elbows down on a handrail and looked at it with one eye only, and was able to get to a point of light. I never saw a disc shape, but whatever it was must have been at an extreme distance from my location. The object appeared to be flashing red, green, and white very quickly and repeatedly over the course of an hour. I spent about 45 minutes trying to look at it and get it into focus. It was a bit cold that night, and I would go inside and come back out, and the object would still be there. I wanted to wait until the next night, on Wednesday night, to see if it would reappear again, but it didn't show, which leads me to think it wasn't a planet or a star, which is what I've stated all along. I'm glad I watched your latest video about Les Stroud seeing something unusual and forgetting to get his camera, as this is exactly what happened to me. For some unknown reason, I didn't even think to get out my phone and try and get a picture of it. If I would have gotten a picture, I would have sent it to you. Anyway, Dave, you're always in my thoughts and prayers, and I want to thank you again for all your hard work. You have been an incredible source of encouragement for me as I struggled with a lot of suicidal thoughts and depression, especially in this last year. Dave, I never got a chance to be a dad, but I have a little 4-year-old niece who doesn't have a father figure in her life, and my wife and I love if she was on her own. doesn't have a father figure in her life, and my wife and I love if she was on her own. I do take to heart what you are saying, and I believe many others are too. I know you have a lot of mail to read, so I will close by saying thank you from the bottom of my heart. Well, thank you for the letter. That red, blue, and green thing, I think I've told you before that many of us here in the Flathead Valley see it in different locations at different times. Something odd, that's for sure. Okay, hi Dave. After watching a recent video, I thought I'd share this tidbit with you and solve at least one puzzle. I was raised by people who still knew how to do things, and one of our fall pursuits was wild honey. Even if you don't have the need or equipment to actually raid the hive for honey, finding it may be fun. Here's how. This is a good email. Make a simple syrup with sugar and water, and cook it long enough to ensure that it's syrupy, about the consistency of pancake syrup. Saturate 2 rags and put them in coffee cans with lids. Make sure the syrup doesn't puddle so the bees are trapped in it. Go into the wilderness, well away from anyone, anywhere that may have hives, so you don't track down domestic bees. Preferably a clear cut with some flowers and water. Locate a few bees on flowers or by the water and catch them in one of your cans. It probably wouldn't hurt to poke some holes in the can lids. Wouldn't want them to smother. Then find a high place to put your can, tall stump maybe. Take the lid off and wait. The bees you caught will take the sugar home and bring back their relatives. When a substantial swarm is working the can, pay attention to the direction they go when they leave. Bees that have made several trips won't circle much, but will load up and leave. Once a beeline is established, moving your can along the beeline towards the hive. If there appears to be more than one beeline, pick the one that seems the strongest and file the other one for future adventures. After you've moved your can a few times, start the second can. When it's working good, put the lid on and move it off some distance to one side. This will give you an angle at which you can pinpoint the location and help determine the distance. Continue to move both cans forward until you think you're close. On a hot day, you can sometimes smell the honey or hear them buzzing. Bees that are feeding are not particularly aggressive, so there's not much risk of getting stung while tracking, but they're very protective of their hives. If the hive is in a place like an old log or stump where you could take the honey, you need to be in full beekeeping protection. Take the time to notice the bees are working when you're out and about for future reference. Also, consider your terrain, how much of it you want to traverse or not. It doesn't hurt to carry a little extra syrup. You'd be surprised how quickly a good hive can clean up a can, pack a lunch. It may take more than one day. The most interesting find I remember was a hive near the top of a rotting snag about 30 feet tall, about 6 feet in diameter. The interior of the base was hollow, so it was standing on a shell just over a foot thick. A hopeful bear had been denning there. You could see where one hive had been dug out and big gouges in the trunk from all the climbing efforts. Even the limbs of the snag were polished from the bear's attempts to get at the remaining hive. Of course, it was too dangerous to try to fall a snag like that, so I'm sure the bear had to leave. P.S. A pinch of wet tobacco and a Band-Aid is a quick solution to easing the pain of a bee sting. I hope you find this interesting and a little bit fun. Life is just so damn serious nowadays. I always appreciate your work, and I think you provided needed continuity for many during this rapidly changing time. Discerning truth from fiction is really challenging right now, and you have made yourself available as a living human with real concerns, real issues, and real values, instead of just another paid talking head. Thank you. Thank you. That was a great bee story. And remember, what instigated that was just a couple videos back, I talked about a story of a woman that disappeared who was out looking for bees. So thank you for that. When you're in the woods and you're looking for something, keep your eyes and ears open. And as I've stated many times, and I'll say it one more time, do not, underline, bold, do not walk through the woods wearing headphones. Cardinal sin. Cardinal sin. Number one, you're missing some great wildlife sounds. Number two, those headphones could end up taking your life. You won't hear what's around you. You won't hear the warning signs. Do not wear headphones. All right. Now, first story I'm going to talk to you about, the missing story. A couple of them today. Some of you are going to say, "Oh, Dave, this is obviously what happened." No. Jeffrey Dupree, 3 years old, Slave Lake, Alberta, Canada. Missing April 24th, 1980. 3 people lived in the home. Husband, wife, and Jeffrey. They had lived in the home for 30 months. They lived on the outskirts of Slave Lake. And Ray, the dad, worked for the local Indian Council, and Denise, the mom, stayed home. Now, they lived on the outskirts. Wasn't a lot of homes, but they had a next door neighbor, and that was Jeffrey's best friend. They rode trikes around each other's front yard, never wandered, stayed close, were best buddies. You remember that when you were a kid. Well, it was described as a very quiet street. Well, at about 1 o'clock, Jeffrey was done with lunch, and Mom put him outside. Now, first of all, let me show you a map where Slave Lake is. So this is Edmonton, Alberta. This is Slave Lake. This black line right here at the bottom is the U.S. border, and I live down in this area. And I've been through all of this: Calgary, Red Deer, Edmonton, and the Canadian Rockies are absolutely gorgeous. So, Jeffrey goes outside. Well, she hears Jeffrey talking, and then she hears her neighbor call Jeffrey's friend to come into the house. Had to wipe his face or something. And then she decided to go out and check on Jeffrey. Like 5 minutes later, and he's gone. Now, it was a weird day in Slave Lake that day, April 24th, 1980. There were 2 huge fires that were burning on the perimeter of the city and around the lake. That's kind of weird. So, at 1:30 that day, she can't find Jeffrey, so she gets in her car and starts driving around, as any mom would do. She doesn't say anything, and at 1:45, she calls the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Says, "My son's missing, I need help." She tells a neighbor, everyone's looking. At 2:20 p.m., our CMP hadn't arrived. She calls him again. Finally, at 2:45, an hour after the original call, they arrive at the Dupree house. And they search in the area behind the house, very rustic, rural, nothing's there, woods. Search the neighborhood, and they're not finding anything. At 6 p.m., a light rain starts falling in the area. Well, the next day, at 11:30, the RCMP canines arrive. And they search for 4 hours. They don't find any scent trail. That morning, 200 students from Slave Lake Regional High School search and are put into search parameters by the RCMP. Now, the day that Jeffrey disappeared, about an hour after his mom put him outside. And the articles state several blocks away, a woman calls the RCMP about a truck driving through the neighborhood that stopped and picked up a boy on the street. Several blocks away. Nobody ever said this looked like Jeffrey. They just thought the truck was suspicious. They tried to ID the truck. They never were able to. So, on May 5th, this happened on April 24th. So on May 5th, would have been an 11-day search. They terminate the search. Jeffrey was a kid that always stayed close to home. He never wandered. He was with his friend. There was no need to wander. They were buddies. They were hanging out. He never walked away from his house. Jeffrey was never found. Now that's what Jeffrey looks like on an age progression artwork that was done in 1985. I'm sorry. This was done in 1995. And then the most recent age progression work was by Missing and Exploited Child Network, did this drawing of him, of what he looked like today. So today he'd be about 40 years old, 42 years old. I'm sorry. He'd be 45 years old if he was alive. Now, about this case, nobody ever heard anything. Nobody saw a car drive up their street. The suspicious truck, yeah, you get those kind of calls all the time. So, could it have been something? It could have. But living in a rural area and taking a child, huge risks. Because in rural areas, there's not a lot of traffic. If somebody sees something, chances are you're going to get caught because the police are going to be able to track you down. In this instance, it was highly unusual that a boy would disappear in a wooded setting like Slave Lake and never be found. That's what they said with the article. But as you can see from our work, the reality of it is that these things happen much more frequently than people are willing to acknowledge. They don't get the press that other cases get. And because of that, police and others tend to think it's really rare. Now, Slave Lake wasn't very far from their house. And rural setting, canines didn't pick up a scent, leaving those 2 yards. And that is key to me. If Jeffrey had walked away, the dogs would have picked up the scent and followed him a couple blocks. Didn't happen. The father of the neighbor was out in the yard part of that time because he called his son in. He never heard. He never saw anything. So the question is, how did Jeffrey get out of that 2-yard setting and disappear? No evidence of animal predation. Light rain that afternoon. Very strange circumstances if you start to put it all together. Again, one more. What was Jeffrey that looked like at the time he disappeared? 3 years old. That's what he had looked like today. I always show the drawings of what people look like today for a multitude of reasons. There are many cases where people were raised by somebody, not their parents, never told that they were abducted. And then later on in life, they realized they were. Now, is it possible Jeffrey got abducted? The chance is always there. No, I'm not infallible, that's for sure. But I just go by the facts that surrounded the case. Disappeared near water. Canines couldn't pick up a scent. Rural setting. Rain that night. And highly unusual. 2 fires in the area simultaneously. Weird. I will say that the Dupres, their marriage hung together and they ended up having another child. I'm sure that Jeffrey haunted them for a lifetime. Okay, next story. Story about a young boy named Curtis Oliver, 22 years old, young man. Missing November 22nd, 1963. And many of the articles said he disappeared at a place called Deil, D-E-I-L Lake. And then they said it's also known as Devil's Lake. Caught my eye. Remember, wrote a book called The Devil's in the Detail. Play on words. But the play is that there's a lot of people that disappear in areas where devil or etc. is in the name of the location. How a place got the name is what I'm interested in. So, Curtis, he lived in Sault Ste. Marie, Canada, with his family. And that city is right on the U.S. border. And the family owned a cabin on Devil's Lake. And on November 22nd, I'll correct that, on November 21st, his mom gave him a ride out to the cabin because he wanted to go moose hunting. And she was going to come pick him up on the 22nd. He was going to spend the night at the cabin, go out, hunt the next day, and then she'd pick him up. She's carrying a small sack and an axe and a .303 rifle. Why an axe? Because moose, that's how you chop them up. You need an axe. They're huge. The amount of meat you can get off a moose is indescribably huge. So, on the 21st, Mom didn't know if he did any good, if he did find anything. She showed up on the 22nd, early in the afternoon. He wasn't there. She came back late that night. He wasn't there. The bed was slept in the previous night, so she knew he was there. Heavy snow started to hit the area the night of the 22nd. Well, they immediately notified the RCMP. A search started the next day. They stated that the snow hid any of the tracks that they wanted to find. But they continued the search. Curtis's dad searched every day, never gave up. On the 29th, about a week after he disappeared, searchers found some cigarettes and 2 holes that were burrowed into the ground as though offering some type of protection from the weather. And they thought that the cigarettes and this burrowing and some small fires might have been from Curtis. 2 days later, they gave up the search. On May 10th, the following year, about 6 months later, there was a 2-day search and rescue effort put on by the police and Curtis's dad. They found nothing more. Curtis was described as an experienced outdoorman, but not experienced in the area around the cabin, and not an experienced hunter. Carrying that .303 rifle, that would be a big indicator to tell anyone where you're at. Remember, if you're a hunter, 3 shots into the air indicate that you need help. Now, where did this happen? And this is key, folks. So, this is Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This is Kinross Old Air Force Base. In a video, I talked to you about 2 Air Force pilots who were scrambled from Kinross by Canada to chase down a UFO that was flying over Lake Superior. They flew out over the lake, disappeared, nobody ever found them. I put this right here because on the cluster map, the U.S. cluster map, there's a cluster of missing people right around Newberry, Michigan. The distance from here and here is about 70 miles. Interesting, eh? This is the U.S.-Canadian border. Now, as you extend down through here in Michigan, many people are missing. And what I say about this, again, the water aspect, Devil's Lake, weather, hunter subcategory. I don't like to make a big deal about this stuff, but after doing this for so long, the same things keep showing up. Curtis Oliver, 22 years old, is at the prime of life in health and strength. The RCMP committed 2 helicopters, airplanes. Hundreds of searchers came from Curtis's hometown. His dad went up there too many times to count, trying to find his son. Horrible. A horrible outcome. When I read this, it broke me up. Because I can't imagine how the family felt. The next segment deals with a disappearance on Nova Scotia. How many people out here watch Oak Island on the History Channel? Are they ever going to find that treasure? Is there a treasure there? They found some very interesting clues. Hope they find it. I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for the Laginas. But Nova Scotia, I've talked about them before. I've talked about the province before. There's been some unusual disappearances there for sure. In this incident, the people were living in an area called the Peacock Settlement right outside of Bayfield, Nova Scotia. Kind of at the far northeast corner of the province. Ollie was a girl, she was 5, and Ralph was a boy, he was 3. They went missing May 13th, 1906. It was a double disappearance. Very unusual. Highly unusual. And they were with Geneva, their sister, who was 7 years old. Well, Ollie and Ralph were told by their dad to go herd up the cows. That's what the article said. Now, hold your taters for a second, because I have written about disappearances where people went out looking for their cows many times. Something spooked the cows, something take the cows, I don't know. But they were out looking for them and they disappeared, just like Ollie and Ralph. So, as the 3 kids are going out looking for the cows, they run into a neighbor named Russell Trenholm. Now, Russell, they've seen him before, and they start to follow him. He's 19. Well, they follow him, they go over a fence, and Russell's with his sister. Russell takes the kids going, hey, you can't come with me, you need to go back over the fence, and he puts the kids back over the fence. Well, they wanted to follow him, and they make kind of a yell, and they're mad. Well, Geneva, the 7-year-old, walks away and starts walking back to the house. And when she has her brother and sister, Ralph and Ollie, out of sight, she thought she heard a scream from her sister. That's all she heard, scream or yell. Well, Geneva comes home, and Ralph and Ollie aren't there. She tells her dad, and their dad goes out looking for him. There was also a rumor that Trenholm had been inappropriate with one of the kids the week prior. It was never explained exactly what that meant, but it was stated in an article. So, creeks, ponds, swamps were drained in the area. Nothing was found. Hundreds of people searched arm in arm for days. Found nothing. Canines found no tracks. The case had huge notoriety because it was 2 kids. Now Now let me explain where this happened first of all. Bayfield, right on the coast. This is Nova Scotia. This is where Oak Island's filmed. To kind of get an idea. This is the US-Canadian border. This is Maine over here. So it's all pretty close. Even though things are happening in Canada, same thing could happen in the US. So, they're searching. They're not finding anything. That was troubling. Because of the notoriety, the chief of detectives for the entire province goes out to Bayfield. And he interviews everybody. And the last person he interviews is Trenholm. And some people have still considered him a suspect. We interviewed him for quite a while. And he came out and he gave an interview, the chief of detectives. And he said that Russell gave clear and unequivocal answers and proved to me he knew nothing about the disappearance. In my world, coming from a chief of detectives, it's pretty darn convincing. Now, the detectives went out to the location where Geneva last saw them all, and where Trenholm admitted that he helped put them over the fence. And the detective interviewed Trenholm's sister, who supported everything Trenholm said about putting the kids over the fence. They walked one way, he walked another. And in that area, the detective found a thread on a branch quite a distance from where they disappeared of Ollie, the girl's clothing. He thought that this added further support that Trenholm had nothing to do with this. But to think that 2 kids disappeared in the middle of rural Nova Scotia in a little tiny settlement where really there's nobody around, folks, that's troubling. Again, very close, almost on the coast. So water, canines, no tracks, because many people tried to track these kids. Couldn't do it. So the question comes in, what happened to Ollie and Ralph? How far can a 3-year-old travel? 3 years old. With Ollie. Now, if one of those kids would have went down, they would have found him. But they didn't. And they searched for miles. I can keep putting these cases in front of you. And in this instance, it's 3 cases from Canada. 1980, 1906, Ollie and Ralph. And Curtis Oliver, 22 years old, in 1963. Canada's huge in area. And the northern reaches of Canada, so much water. A lot of places to hide. Think about these cases all the time. Think about these kids all the time. Kids 3 and 5 years old. That's young. Young man, 22 years old. And then Jeffrey Dupres, 3 years old. What happened to these kids? I'm highly convinced that Ollie and Ralph disappeared under very unusual circumstances. I don't think Trenholm was involved just because of the consistency of the chief of detectives and his assistant detective that interviewed Trenholm. 2 wise men. I'm sure they could have figured this out. Dupree, hard to convince me that Jeffrey would have wandered from the front yard where his friend was. Very hard. Curtis Oliver, Hunter, disappears. no tracks. I would have done like his dad did. I would have kept looking. I'd probably be looking years later. But, friends, that's our segment for today. I'm humbled that all of you are here. And you're the ambassadors of Missing 411. Because it is you that will spread this word and filter it out so that others will know what's happening. Without your assistance, I'm nothing. Without you pushing the buttons and getting these stories out there, nobody will know about them. And Canada had said, I'd had comments from Canada, oh, I do more cases from Canada. Well, here you go, here's 3. So, Canadians, start spreading the word. Please make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you did. Watching these videos from beginning to end helps us. And watching them a second and a third time helps us. So, I appreciate you. And remember, you're not alone. Don't be afraid to make a comment under the video. If somebody attacks you, they'll be gone. I don't mind polite conversation, people who disagree, that's not an issue. But attacks, that dog don't hunt. So, thank you. And hopefully, I will see you soon. Paulides out.